I'm talking about another dungeon today, except this time there were several twists and several things that I did differently, so I kind of wanted to talk about some of the elements of the things that I did with that. Start off with two very different scenarios. The first dungeon that I talked about was a good old, regular knoll dungeon with like a big froghemoth at the end. The finale of that dungeon was great because someone polymorphed into a giant ape within the froghemoth's stomach and ripped it open. So that was funny. Unfortunately, since none of them could read Draconic, they did not get a guide to another quest line. So instead just kind of went to the closest place that they knew in hopes that something would be there. So that's something that I think I need to plan for in the future. Have maybe like a way for them to get everything done, even if their features don't allow it. And I mean, I did, but it wasn't too obvious, so I think I definitely need to work on that. It came in the form of an NPC that's traveling with them who can speak Draconic and read it, but they never thought to ask, and they pretty much just brushed it aside because it was +1 and had poison on it, so they were like, oh, that's what that's for, cool. But no, that was a whole ass quest line. In any case, today we're talking about another dungeon that I did that was actually on the same island that they originally did the first one on. This was actually an impromptu one that I managed to just get done in a week using a random dungeon generator. I can't remember the specific website, but I'll link it in the description. It makes big dungeons, but it makes good ones. There's like a lot to them. It's primarily just for the layout, and it can also give you some neat ideas for kind of what you could put in each room. I don't really follow that so much because I feel like I can put more interesting stuff in myself than what they can give me, but it certainly gives me a lot of ideas. The layout is a bit more structured because this dungeon is a actual dungeon, like a Yuan-ti dungeon where they take, people and torture them and imprison them and stuff. So that was interesting to build. And something important to note is that when I was creating this dungeon, I was basing it around a split party because the party had not necessarily decided to split, but it kind of happened out of their own decision making, because while they were walking around this Yuan-ti city, everyone was invisible and had just kind of left one of the player characters, who then got suspected of being an intruder and imprisoned, and then the rest invisible and wild-shaped and stuff. So basically there was a party of 2 and a party of 3 that I was planning for here. And the challenge was coming up with interesting stuff that can preoccupy them without taking too much time from either group and keeping the pacing going, which I had a few techniques with. We'll start from the top of the dungeon, the main entrance, which they'd gone through, which was a secret like compartment under a tile in the palace that they'd gone under, and the first room that they had to encounter was a puzzle that they couldn't solve because they couldn't read Abyssal. That was something that was very bad for that island because it was all Yuan-ti stuff and none of them could speak either of the languages that they mainly spoke. So, and after a bit of toying around and trying to just push around this snake, because they knew what they had to do, they just didn't know how to do it, because the puzzle presented itself pretty obviously on what you have to do, but there was a plaque that explains in a cryptic way how to do it, basically. And then there was also a door that led into like a main large room, which is like the main room, the kind of like underground palace area for the ruler, who was actually out at the time, thank God, because they are a CR18 thing, Yuan-ti Anthema. So definitely good that I did not put that in there. And that was just a simple puzzle that they could spend any amount of time on. And that was something that I could pretty easily cut in the middle of and transfer over to the other party so that, the pacing's fine. In terms of the other party, I decided that since it was just the 2 of them and they had actually, in comparison to the rest of the party, lagged a little bit behind in terms of their XP due to absences and stuff, give them a couple encounters for just the 2 of them. And I thought, well, I could do that, but it might break up the pacing. So instead, I created 2 stat blocks and I gave them to the other players and they fought each other. And it was great because that was probably the most enthusiastic my party have been for a fight in a while, because they were killing each other. Very wholesome stuff. It was great. It definitely gave me some insight on how some people would DM their games. Like, they were getting a bit aggressive. It was brilliant. And it kind of evened out the experience between everyone as well, until I killed one of the characters. But yeah, that was a kind of technique that I used. It came in the form of constructs that had specific commands as well, so that I could kind of give the group playing them very solid instructions on what they were supposed to do, so that the encounter would still go how I would somewhat intend it, but The players get to mess around with it, and I gave them a couple options to work with, but not enough to warrant another player character level's worth of managing features and stuff. This room also intersected the main one, which the first party were also getting to. So they kind of had a moment where like the bottom party had kind of just walked out into the room and were like, oh. And then the other party were like listening through the door like, fuck, that's them, what do we do? And then combat started and they all busted in and they managed to get to each other, position themselves and kill everyone in there because fireballs. So yeah, there was a portal in that room. My party are likely never going to go back there, so I might as well say that leads to the Abyss, which is where elite Yuan-ti teams have been going down and trying to tame it a little bit and failing horribly, but trying. So yeah, if they jumped in there, which they could have, like this big old portal in the main room, they would have ended up in an endless maze. From here, this is pretty much just dungeon rooms and it gets a lot less linear, and they could have kind of gone anyway. But I'll describe it in the order of the rooms that they went in. Near the top, a room that was actually sealed away by the puzzle, is a pretty pointless area, but one that the party were a bit confused about. And they could have also accessed that either through the puzzle or having to fight a bunch of Yuan-ti. They could have maybe snuck by, but it would be very difficult due to light in there and stuff. I just put the heads of 3 animals in there, and underneath them, bas-reliefs of random stuff. And they each did a different thing. There was a panther head, a boar head, and a giant frog head. If you touch the panther head, you get faster, but you get a lust for blood, because that's fun. In the middle, if you touch the boar head, you get a free casting of Commune from the perspective of Pelor, god of sun, except it's a lie and the commune will be all fake. And then the last one, the giant frog, if you touch it, you get real stinky, and the only way to get rid of it is like a remove curse. So that was a bit stupid, but none of them interacted with it, as they shouldn't have done, because the next door was unlockable anyway, so smart move there. And then they walked into the weirdest dungeon room I've ever made, which was a failed Yuan-ti experiment where they had made a room out of a person and made them a lizard. So the entire room was a living organism of a lizard man who couldn't really speak and wasn't exactly that sentient, but could like put eyes anywhere in the room. Everyone was really cautious about going through it, obviously, but it was safe to go through because the lizard had no reason to like kill them or anything. And then one of the party members casted Dispel Magic on it, and it ended the magical effect that was keeping it tied to the wall. So kind of like, you know, when you're in like primary school and you have the frickin' like squares and you like stick them together and you make a little cube. That's kind of what happened with it, because it folded in on itself and just whoop, and it actually trapped Laura's character's little dragon friend, who got almost immediately stabbed by someone because everyone were using weapons to try and get it out, etc, etc. So that was pretty interesting. An important fact for later, the little pseudo dragon got transformed into a giant constrictor snake to help it get out. Keep that in mind. The next room they went into was an like old abandoned cell room that was like open, and there was a big old battle where a bunch of Yuan-ti and Cobalt Soul had died, and they picked up some stuff. The wizard got a neat spell book, and they also got an immovable rod out of it, I believe. Yeah, an immovable rod, because that's fun to give to your players. Nothing too particular in there other than mad ramblings of librarians. They went down dining room area, literally nothing important in there, which the players get quite worried about when you do that, but they moved on and nothing happened. Then they went into the ruler's like makeup room that they use to kind of not only make themselves look sexy as fuck, but they have like a mirror that shows you in kind of like a more attractive but kind of serpentine way, so angular features more, but you might get like a forked tongue or slit eyes or something like that. The next room was a guard room for the prisons ahead, where it was a pretty easy fight. 2 big snakes and 2 Yuan-ti who were definitely fucking. They were dealt with pretty easily, so that's good. And then the prisons. There were 3 rooms total. One of them was empty, one of them had a dead guy in it, and one had an alive guy, but a bad alive guy. But nevertheless, the party saved him and kind of came out with him, and he's been a dick ever since. They didn't have to save him. He offers no reward, but they did. And now he's with them on their boat, and they don't like it so much because he called the boat shit. In any case, that was the whole dungeon. In terms of how good it was, my party was definitely a bit more creeped out. I put a few, not necessarily horror elements, but definitely it's a spooky place elements that make it kind of disturbing to be around, because it's the Yuan-ti. They are quite possibly, to my memory, one of the most powerful evil civilizations or groups of people similar to, like, you know, gnolls, goblins, bugbears, all that stuff. And I wanted to do them justice, and I think I did so by having them witness a lot of torture. I described someone getting a hot brand shoved up their arse. That was something. Luckily, that's literally all I said. I'm a very squeamish person. I can't actually describe it in detail. I literally just say what's happening. Like Laura's character once cut off a drow's ear, and I just said, yep, you do that. You got it now. Great. Don't make me describe that. Because I just hate doing it. In any case, I think it was successful. The wholesome PvP that happened, I think the party definitely liked. I balanced it well enough, I think. The party did get slowed, all of them, because they're constructs and they don't have great wisdom. So yeah, it was pretty one-sided for the party, which is how most encounters normally are. In any case, hopefully this was kind of useful for you to understand a little bit more about how to structure things and why I did certain things. I think a lot of the rooms were just to add levels of interest into the Yuan-ti. Like, I think my party at this point, after going through that dungeon, have learned a lot about them, how cruel they can be, how despite that there's still some level of humanity to them in terms of just their motivations, which is power and stuff like that. And they got a few neat things out of it. They got spellbook, they got favor with the Cerberus assembly, they got an immovable rod. They didn't actually manage to find any of the things they were deliberately looking for because they'd all died by then. If they went sooner, they might have found a couple of them alive. But yeah, hopefully this was useful for you. If you need more content like this, you better subscribe and hit the bell. Otherwise, what am I going to threaten this time? Mean things? I'm going to say something mean in the Discord about you, which you can join in the description so you can see my meanness. Or you can comment where we can talk about stuff there, which helps us out as well. And of course the YouTuber thing where you like the video. You can dislike it as well, the button's there. I wouldn't recommend it though. It gives you a virus. So yeah, thanks for watching. See ya. I'm so glad that ended. My knees fucking killed.